Thank you, and welcome to the Patriots 300 Level Podcast. My name is Kevin, and I'm back with my co-host Eric. Welcome back to our 66th episode, where we have a really special guest today, who is definitely the biggest guest we've had so far, Jerry Thornton for Barstool Sports. I've been actually really looking forward to this episode ever since we really reached out to Jerry for quite a while, just because I've been following him via Barstool for years, ever since I was in college. So I can't remember how long that was, but probably at least 10 years ago or so. Really enjoy reading Jerry, listening to Jerry, even when on EI before. So I know everyone knows where to find him, but again, he's on Twitter/X at Jerry Thornton1. You can read all his blogs at barstoolsports.com and definitely pick up his books, Six Rings and From Darkness to Dynasty. Really great reads. Both Eric and I read them.
I have them both here, so very highly recommend them. I think one of the things I actually like the most about these books that you don't typically get, it's from a fan's perspective of the Patriots history, where a lot of times you get a historical biography, whereas this is Jerry going through telling you what he experienced through the Patriots' whole history. So it's a really great read and really good perspective.
Wow, thanks very much, Eric. And are there any holidays coming up maybe where somebody might want to have a, I don't know, perspective on the early bad times of the Patriots, or maybe revel in the 20 years of pure glory? Why, yes, there is, and perhaps this should be the perfect gift for everybody on your list. So thanks. I appreciate you guys.
All right. So I think this episode would be a little cathartic in that aspect about what we've been experiencing the last couple of years around here, and kind of what we experienced, at least at the beginning part of my lifetime.
Yeah, for sure. And to piggyback off of what Eric was talking about, one of the real blessings that I've had as I've turned from just a guy who had a completely inappropriate, disproportionate, and downright dangerous emotional attachment to a football team, is that along the way, nobody ever asked me to do anything other than just talk about this team in the way that you care about them. Like, I never had any mandate from WEEI, and certainly Barstool, where we have always from the beginning, and I'm coming up on 20 years of being with this company in one capacity or another, have always just been like, this is who we are, and we're authentic, and the wins, like we love them, we revel in those. The losses kill us when it's a downtime like it is right now. It's hard to face the morning. And early on, when I was at EEI, one of the Patriots beat writers, and he meant this as a compliment, that's how I took it. He said, you know what, I envy you, because this matters to you. Like, you enjoy this. Me, I just want the story. I don't care who wins or loses. And I was like, I went home and I told friends of mine about it. And I said, if that ever becomes me, just start digging the ditch. And I want a 6-foot grave. As Norm Macdonald said, why is it when you kill somebody, all of a sudden you get lazy and now you do a shallow grave? Like, finish the job, go 6 feet under. So yeah, and it's been a wild ride, and it would have been great to talk to you guys, I don't know, maybe after they won their 7th Super Bowl, but here we are we wondered what it would be like if this team ever like leveled off or became average. And now that they're plummeting to the bottom of the crater, at the bottom of the Marianas Trench, you guys have me on. Yeah, okay, here we go. Yeah. Paint your butt red and dance for us, monkey. You know. I'm sorry. I'm in a strange place right now, obviously.
No, I hear you. That's how we've been kind of. I haven't experienced this since probably when I was a kid, when I remember the early like Bledsoe days. So again,
and
really
for me, I haven't. I started following in 2001 when I was in 2nd grade, which we all know how that turned out. So this is really the darkness I've ever experienced, other than just reading it through your book of what you had to go through.
I appreciate it, and that's part of what why I wrote it.
Yeah.
Because I think it makes what we've experienced since you've been in 2nd grade all the better. You know what I mean? It'd be one thing if it's just been, I don't know how like Yankee fans feel about this stuff. Like, what was your downtime? The Don Mattingly years? Well, when I was 22 years old, they won their first playoff game of my lifetime. My oldest son, when he hit 22, watched them win their 6th Super Bowl. and they had been to 9 of them just in that span. So, I wrote it partly for those guys to just as just kind of a perspective. Thomas Paine in the American Crisis had a quote. I'm going to try to do it exactly, but it was essentially, that which comes too easy, you don't value. I know I butchered it, but it's just, that if you really work hard for something, if you suffer for a thing, it means a lot more than if you just kind of to the manner born, the way, say, a Yankee fan would be. So I hope you guys can understand that even the way it is now, strangely, is better than it was, say, when, the early 80s, when, they lost the final game of the year against the Colts, and we were celebrating because that gave them the #1 overall pick, and they drafted Ken Sims, a defensive tackle out of Texas, who was the consensus #1 overall, and he promised he would have more sacks in his first year than the team had the year before, which was like 15. I think he finished his career with like 8. That was what we're celebrating. Hey, we got Ken Sims. In his first training camp, someone asked him and said, "You're kind of not really playing especially well." And he goes, "Hey, I'll be ready on game day." So instantly his nickname became Game Day. And guess what? He was never ready on game day. So, I had this long talk with my oldest brother today. I'm the youngest of 5 with 3 older brothers who raised me to be Patriots fans. And we talked about this season, and we just kind of said it's so absurd. It's so ridiculous. All you can do is just lean into it, stare into that skid, and just see just how preposterous it can get. And maybe you end up with the #1 overall pick. Like, that's where we're at, and it's not even Thanksgiving yet.
Yeah. No, exactly. And I think there's something I was telling Eric earlier, where I was watching the Giants game last night, and I was like, that's a 2-8 team you would expect to be 2-8 because they're just not good overall. They're not good offensively. They're not good defensively. Whereas you look at the Patriots and they're 2-8, and I know Parcells has the quote, "You are what your record is," but they just don't look like that prototypical 2-8 team where they're in almost every game, and they just don't have enough to go over the hump there. And that's usually like what a 500 team does. I feel like, except last game was awful. That was the end, really, pretty much, I think, of Mac this year. So I know you wrote about it today. And what were you going to say, Eric?
I was just going to say, if you watch just the offense outside of the Bills game, it does look like a 2-8 team, but the defense is keeping them in the games too. But like you said, they're in every game. They have a chance to win it at every game, and they just find another way to lose every single week.
Oh yeah, I mean, they're all a blur. But if you really dig into it at a granular level, they've had the 2 games where they were just non-competitive.
Yeah,
and that was Dallas and New Orleans. I was using the term I hate to use, but sometimes it's all you got, for the Philly and the Miami games, which was moral victory. Okay, we weren't expecting wins in those, and they were a few plays away from making it taking a lead late in the game or whatever. But what they've also shown in those 8 competitive games were this genius for finding new and unique ways to lose.
Yeah.
And that's not a positive. I mean,
exactly.
you look at the week 1 game at Philly, against Philly, and Kayshon Boutte makes a grab at the to set up a 1st and goal, and just gets his feet in bounds, and on replay it gets reviewed, and nope, that second toe hit the white. That's the difference. Well, I think in every game, well, let's say 90% of NFL games, and I didn't check the math on this, so deal with my estimates. I was told there'd be no arithmetic on this. That it seems like most games come down to maybe a dozen plays, 50-50 balls, a 1st down gets negated by a penalty. And I would say of all those games this year that came down to those couple of plays, the Patriots have converted maybe 5% of them. They just always manage to find in a high leverage situation a way to blow it.
Mhm.
At Las Vegas, when
Yep.
Devontae Parker has a ball right in his mitts and it goes through. Against Washington, Mac Jones launches one and puts it right in Jalen Rager's hands. And he does what Jalen Rager has done throughout his career, which is doesn't haul it in. And then you've got at the end of that game, the Juju Smith-Schuster lets one go right through his thumbs. And, if you're watching it at home, you know that Jonathan Vilma was like, oh, you don't throw that ball. That's a bad decision. You had plenty of time. You didn't need to throw that. It was a foot off the ground. And it went right between the meaty part of the thumbs of the guy who is supposed to be your wide receiver one. That's on him. But again, it's as a team, they keep sharing the load of how to blow a game that is winnable. And it's maddening. At least it was before I just decided to let it all go. Sure, let's see what it's like. We're just gonna be the freak in the town that like dances around and people pelt us with rocks and garbage and we dance for money. That's what it's become now. Oh,
yeah.
I'm really not a good
place. So I think the two big things we wanted to get to today, one of them I know you wrote about today, with Mac Jones, and I think everyone could say altogether he's definitely broken, at least for this year. Where do you see kind of, I know there's basically three things that you can do to try and break a young quarterback. One is have bad protection. Two is having changing coaching. And three is having not enough weapons around him. And they pretty much did all three in the last 3 years. Do you think that's something that, let's say he has time to reset and all that sort of stuff, is it salvageable, do you think, or do you think they're going to end up going a different direction? What are your kind of thoughts on really Mac overall and what like his future may look like?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, and the premise is spot on. I mean, like even that game against in Germany, I think in the first half he was pressured on 50% of his dropbacks, and he was sacked 5 times. And I think some of those sacks are coverage sacks. Some of them are because his top priority is not to throw the ball away, not to get strip sacks. So a lot of times he just wraps up and takes it. Fine, I can live with that. But then you see that interception he threw at the end.
Yeah.
And that to me is a guy who's damaged. I don't want to say damaged beyond repair because I believed in him. I wanted him from about halfway through the 2020 season. I'm like, they keep losing, and this kid from Alabama is within reach. And I think, he's what we're looking for. But he really needs time off. And I when I write, sometimes I get into a theme and I can't, I'm like a dog with a bone. I can't stop chewing on it. And I kept referring to German things. And, the greatest single season of a TV series ever was Band of Brothers. And Buck Compton, who was played by Neil McDonough, was a leader of men. They respected him. His officers liked him. And then he just became mentally damaged. He had seen too much. He had suffered too much. And he had to go back behind the lines to a hospital and just chill out for a while. And I think in order to salvage Mac Jones, you really have to like not count on him for the rest of the year. For all the reasons that you mentioned. I hate to think that it's permanent, but I watched this guy not facing pressure and throwing weirdly, like off his front foot, like his mechanics break down. And he threw I've seen one worse pass in recent memory. All right, I'll say 2. One was thrown by Tim Tebow in preseason when he was here. And it came out of his hand sideways, like when you throw a wet Nerf ball at the beach, to the point where I was ready to like go to the next press conference and say, are you sure that he's left-handed? Like if we threw it, put his other hand and let's see how he's doing. And the second worst pass I've ever seen was thrown by Jacoby Myers 30 yards back upfield to Chandler Jones. And I don't know what net effect that had on Chandler Jones, but clearly he went off the rails. And then there was that one that he tried to throw to Gesicki, and I don't know what he was thinking. I don't know why he threw it that way. So he to be salvaged, he really needs like timeout and an overhaul. And I think, yeah, like you said, it's that whole, I hate the cliche, but I'm going to use it, the perfect storm
Mhm.
of all these things that derailed what they were building on in his first season, where let's not forget his fourth game of his career. I was calling it go to Damarong when Tom Brady came back, and it was Sunday Night Football, and it was like the biggest challenge this kid was going to face, and he outplayed Brady.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like all objective measures, he was the better quarterback that night. And now I see this person, and I don't know how we got here, this journey. And uh, can I keep blaming it on Matt Patricia, or do we just have to say it's it's all of the above? I don't
Mhm.
know, but I think there's too much there to just throw it away for now. But if he doesn't start the rest of the season, you won't hear a complaint out of me. What
Yeah.
do you guys think? Like, here I
Yes,
am rambling.
I think that's a really good point. Me and Kevin both have been Mac truthers compared to some of the rest of the fan base, where we both believe in him. Myself, along like you, I believed in Mac back in when he was in Bama, and I wanted the Patriots to get him, and I've liked him ever since. And up until a few weeks ago, I still believed in him, thought he was the future. But it's just the last few games, just seeing, like you said, his fundamentals declining, and it's just I don't know if he just needs a change of scenery, needs an just a whole offseason to reset. I could definitely see them bring in a veteran. I don't think they're going to be able to get a top 2 pick to get Williams or May. And if that's the case, there isn't really much out there unless you're paying Kirk Cousins $50 million a year coming off of an Achilles at 36, or you go with Jimmy G, who's an injury history, or Jacoby Brissett, someone like that. So I think if you bring in him to compete next offseason, but again, I'm just worried that this season, especially if he just keeps going down that rabbit hole, he's just going to get worse and worse, getting bad habits, and might just be broken around beyond repair. I hope that's not the case, but that's just something that worries me.
Yeah, and even trying to build through the draft. I mean, of all the positions and all the sports and all the world, trying to evaluate this one is just such a sucker's game.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, look at how many times the Jets have had their franchise quarterback of the future, and it's blown up in their face like
Yep.
a special
Mhm.
delivery from Bugs Bunny. And I mean, look at Zach Wilson. Like he finally got out of the habit of throwing interceptions,
Mhm.
and then last night he threw a horrendous one with 3 timeouts and 2.5 minutes to go in the red zone. And so I don't know that he can come back from that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But then you look at like Brock Purdy,
Mhm.
literally the last guy taken in the draft, or CJ Stroud, a guy who came out of college with a lot of just doubters, like,
Mhm.
he's another one of these Ohio State guys who's
Mhm.
not going to make it. And Dobbs from Minnesota. I mean,
Mhm.
it's bonkers trying to properly evaluate these guys. And even Caleb Williams, like again, my brother, I mentioned before, he's all over this guy. He would love nothing more than
Mhm.
for the Patriots to get the number 1 pick. And I'm like, are we talking about the guy who was being clutched to his mother's
Mhm.
bosom, like,
Yeah.
and crying like a 2-year-old that lost a balloon? Like, what? That's the guy. He's going.
Mhm.
Trust me, he's intense. He cares too much. I'm like, oh, okay, but you never know. I mean, they
Exactly.
they they surprised the world when they took Jimmy Garoppolo, and a few years later they trade Garoppolo for a 2nd-round pick, and everyone's going, "Oh my gosh, they got ripped off! How do you
Yeah.
only get a 2nd-round pick?" And now Garoppolo can't get arrested in the
Mhm.
Yeah.
NFL. Like no one wants anything to do with him. So trying to build through the draft, it's just it feels like it could just take forever. But
Mhm.
Yeah.
what free agent quarterbacks become available that you can build a franchise
Mhm.
around?
Exactly. And I think one of my biggest fears is I wanted to get your opinion about this actually is, say you do let Mac go because you think he's broken or he needs to change of scenery. I don't know if he'll go to this extent, but the alternative is he could always end up like Jim Plunkett, where he was number 1 overall pick, rookie of the year, and then a little different situation where he dealt with injuries, played through them, but then you shipped him off to San Fran, and then he ends up having a borderline Hall of Fame career with the Raiders, wins 2 Super Bowls. I don't know if that'll be Mac, but that's just a concern, where he did have a really good rookie year, one of the top 5 rookie years for a quarterback. Was almost rookie of the year if Jamar Chase didn't have a great last week of the season. And then just the last 2 years has regressed because partially his surroundings around him. Whereas if he was to go to a new change of scenery, say he was to go to San Francisco, or if Brock Purdy gets hurt, or another team that puts him in a better position to win, he could have success.
Yeah, and there's a lot of you know, depth to that analogy too, because Jim Plunkett again was drafted #1 overall by a terrible team. The Patriots of the 70s, that really became a wagon and would have competed for championships if their coach hadn't bailed on them, and that's a long story. But they ended up trading him to San Francisco for a motherload of picks that they just crushed, like one right after another. They got first round picks, and they made great selections. But he was behind a shaky offensive line. He had very little in the way of people to throw to. He became the target of everybody's like frustration, like it's all on him. And he was an introvert. Like there's a story in From Darkness to Dynasty I tell where the old traditional thing where the sitting around the dining hall, all right, rookie, get up and sing your team fight song. And it's been going on in football for 60 years. And he was like, I don't think I know it. And they're going, well, you got to sing something. Okay, so he sang the only song he could think of, which was Jingle Bells. And everyone's sitting there going, all right, it's July, it's a million degrees out. This guy's singing Jingle Bells. And it was just like, okay, super awkward. But I mean, a fantastic human being and guy, and every Pats fan had reason to be thrilled that he finally broke through. And I think therein lies like the danger of giving up on a guy too early. And that as far as getting rid of Jones, I don't see why, when you got 2 more years left on his rookie deal, well, he's next year, and then he would have to really earn it to get the 5th year. But why not keep him on first round, 4th year player money, in case he finally that light comes on and he clicks. I mean, because you know what, like you guys who are Jones loyalists, and maybe we're having a tough time with disillusioned. I've never for a moment bought into the Bailey Zappi stands.
Oh yeah, 100%. I haven't either.
Yeah,
and I think the last drive yesterday just kind of proved why no one should be buying into the Zappi fever from last year.
Was there a person in that building that was fooled by the fake spike? I mean, a serious percentage of those people are from Germany and only see a little bit of football on TV and probably had never seen a fake spike before. And every one of them was saying, "What fake spike? That's not the spike. Look, he's going to throw the ball. Oh, they got it." Like there were 3 defenders in the area where he tried to throw it.
Yeah.
Okay, and I don't want to go too harsh on him because he went to where did he come? I'm flaking on the name of his school. Was it Western Kentucky or Middle Tennessee? Or
I think it was Western Kentucky. It was, I think, like a blue and white jersey. I think it
was Western Kentucky.
Yeah, southeastern Louisiana, like northeast Rhode Island, wherever it was from. It's one of those places that has the qualifier as to where it's located in the state. So I'm not a huge
Western Kentucky.
Yeah, and I want to be kind to him, but when he had a couple of adequate games last year, people got way out over their skis on him. It was, it took him about, I want to say 8 quarters maybe before he reverted to form and did what you expect out of an inexperienced rookie and started throwing terrible picks. So I don't think he's the answer. And look, maybe we're wrong. Maybe he will get first team reps in practice and find himself or whatever. Oh, he's got a bigger arm than Mac, whatever. I'm not buying it until I see it. I still think Jones has more to work with, than really anybody in his rookie class, with the exception of Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. So that kind of brings us to really the next point would be looking towards next year. I know both Eric and I are still big believers in Bill, as I believe you are, based off of everything you've written. What do you see? And I know this is really the hot topic now, and I think everyone's itching to try and break a story first or have some sort of scoop. And you're seeing a ton of stuff out there now. It's like, oh, it may happen, or this is possible, where everyone's just trying to have a story so that way, if it does happen, they can claim it's right. Um, what are your thoughts on kind of what's going to happen with Bill and what's going to happen with like the player personnel department, really? So they could be two separate things. They could be the same thing in one overall. Where do you see, because of how the season's going, what do you think is your impressions of what may happen?
Didn't Ben Volen have him getting fired if they lose in
Yep.
Germany? Yeah, there we go. Yeah, again, look, Ben and I get along, and he's I've done a podcast and had him on. I chat with him at training camp, but probably the least sourced person covering the Patriots for sure. Like,
Yeah.
gets no info. So that was a red herring from the beginning. I didn't even bother blogging about it because there were so many qualifiers in there. It could be the speculation, whatever. The people that are saying he's not going to last the season just need to F all the way off.
Yeah.
Like, tell me you're a fraud without telling me you're a fraud. After everything that this guy has done, after he built an empire, he has this, again, cratered season. You think that they're going to make him like do the walk of shame? They didn't even do that with Pete Carroll in 1999. He took an 11-5 Super Bowl team to 10-6 to 9-7 to 8-8. They gave him the dignity of letting him walk. And what is gained from getting Belichick out of there other than it gives red meat to all the people who hate him because he's mean during his press conferences and he's been dismissive. And Marv Levy's wife, I guess, came out and complained about it wasn't good to Marv, and we're still mad that he ran up the score on Joe Gibbs like 16 years ago. F all the way off. Seriously. I can now envision, however, a world in which they find some kind of a compromise at the end of the season. It'd be one thing if they're a 9-8 team this year, or 7-10 or whatever. If they're 2-8 and 2-14 is a possibility, it would be really easy for Mr. Kraft to just say it's not working. It worked, now it's not working. I think if that other possibility, that sort of split the baby and say, well, you're still the head coach, but someone else is going to do all the personnel moves, that's a non-starter. At that point, he just goes, I'm done. Because he, like so many other head coaches in this league, value their ability to pick people that will fit what they're trying to do. And the history in this league of conflict between GMs and coaches is legendary, where you get a guy and he doesn't fit my system. Well, hey, we got you a second tight end. Well, great. We run a 2-back set. What am I going to do with a second tight end? All that. And so many now of these like new head coach hires come as a package deal. It's a bad example to cite right now, but Josh McDaniels, and he brings Dave Ziegler, and they were both gone by Halloween of their first season. But there's a reason why that works. So I don't think that happens. And I think maybe there's a really strong possibility that Belichick just kind of takes the graceful way out. Says, you know what, this has not worked out. I'm going to be 72 soon. I would love them to give him just kind of a figurehead position in the front office, vice president of football ops or whatever, maybe with some say in how things are done, or is like an advisory capacity, and that way he keeps his dignity intact. Because the alternative is what? He's going to go to Washington and start over.
Yeah. The only teams that really make sense for him to go to, in my opinion, is either the Cowboys, which I don't know if he'd want to deal with Jerry Jones as an owner, or the Chargers with all that talent and just Brandon Staley as the head coach. If it's not those two teams and there's just some wild card team that comes up, I don't see him going to Washington, with that situation where they're not in a position to win the next 3 to 4 years. The Bears, where they're not in a position to win the next 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, and even with that, even if he goes to a team that has a relatively well-stocked cabinet of talent, you're still rebuilding it in a sense. You're still going to try to implement your defense that you're comfortable with, that you know how it works. You're going to want the Earhart Perkins offense or some like updated version of it. And it's a lot of work to rebuild a team and get front office people that you trust and assistants that you trust and guys who are going to be ready when you stop them in the hall and you're going to quiz them the way he legendarily does. Like, okay, who's the defensive coordinator we're facing this year? Okay, where did he go to school and what does he like to do and whatever, which is how he operates. And walking into a building full of strangers and starting from scratch, that's a young man's game. And when next draft he's going to be 72 years old. And I don't know that he needs that. Maybe it's just time to enjoy Nantucket and fish more and just kind of have a figurehead position. I mean, look, King Charles has a figurehead position. It seems like it's a pretty good gig, to have nothing asked of you. You just go out and just kind of spin your whistle around on the practice field and training camp and tell old Ted Marchibroda stories or whatever. But then if that's the case, what do? Do you leave some of his guys in to run the team? I mean, clearly the Crafts are enamored with Gerard Mayo. A lot of people in the media love him. It doesn't seem like there's anything not to like about him. Does that make him a head coach? Is he gonna work well with the Belichick leftovers that are still kind of loyal to him? It's the history of succession to the throne has been an ugly one. Look up Charlemagne when he decided to divide his kingdom between his two sons, and we went from 80 years of peace in France to 200 years of bloody civil strife. So I'm sorry, I'm tired and I'm getting in a lot of historical references. I'm gonna apologize for all my actions, fellas. I'm rambling.
No, that's fine. That would actually give me the next thing I would say, where like if you were to move on from Bill and everyone's saying that Mayo is supposed to be the successor, by how bad the season has gone, would you want someone to still run basically Bill's system, but hasn't been known to run Bill's system as good as Bill has? Like, if you're going to have someone run Bill's system, wouldn't you want the one person that's run it the best for 30 years to run that? So wouldn't it make more sense if you were to move on from him to completely change over? Whereas if you're running with Mayo, he may be good, but he may just run it at like a 70% version of Bill. So
and another thing too is your biggest issue the last 2.5 years has been offense. Are you going to give the reins to someone that only coaches defense, whether it's Mayo or you read some of the reports of getting Vrabel in house, who hasn't done well? I think he's 3-12 in his last 15 games, something like that. And his issues have been offense as well. So if you do move on from Bill, who do you really go with?
Yeah, I'm really comfortable with the idea of continuing to run the Belichick defense. Or, even if it's a disciple of his, like Mayo. I mean, anyone who was around in the mid 2000s will tell you that Mayo was a coach on the field from the beginning, and he was quickly a captain's pick. He was defensive rookie of the year, excuse me, and has the respect of everybody. So that's a plus. I think I'm finally at the point where I'm exhausted with this offense, that, the league evolves, and I'm not sure that this system has evolved with the league. And one of the writers, might have been Jeff Howe, might have been Mark Daniels. I apologize to which one wrote it, but did a piece about how Bill O'Brien has tried to work in the new wrinkles that are common in the league, and RPOs and zone blocking and all this kind of stuff. And okay, if that's the case, they had 2 field goals in this last game. So my biggest frustration with it, and it goes back a long ways, is how many talented, accomplished veteran receivers come here and just can never figure it out.
Yep.
You know, and we've got two of them right now, Devontae Parker and
Mhm.
Juju Smith-Schuster. We can go back to Chad Johnson. If you want to go back further, Joey Galloway, Doug Gabriel way back
Mhm.
in the day. But then you get these random guys who know it like this.
Mhm.
Right now, it's Demario Douglas. If you want to go back to the early 2000s, it was David Givens,
Mhm.
you know,
Yep.
and neither of whom were high draft picks. And maybe it's time to change things where when it works, it's great.
Mhm.
But every receiver shouldn't have to be able to like discern the periodic table of the elements just to get
Mhm.
open. You
Yep.
know, like if it's that complicated, maybe it needs to be simplified. And because again, Smith Schuster and everyone just the shorthand is, oh,
Mhm.
he sucks. He's a bum. He had 900 yards
Mhm.
last year for the Super Bowl champions. Well, that's because they were throwing to Travis Kelce. Okay, but he was the number 2 guy on that
Mhm.
offense.
Yeah.
2018, he had 1,400 yards.
Mhm.
I don't know what he has right now. He might have, I don't think he has 200. I'd have to look it up. But I know yesterday he had 1 catch for 9 yards.
Yep.
Like, at what point do we just say it shouldn't be this
Mhm.
complicated? You know, maybe a quarterback who can roll the pocket and make plays out of structure like we're seeing every single week around the league.
Mhm.
Gardner Minshew, okay, he buys some time. He leaves the pocket. He completes 30-yard passes. He did it 3 times.
Mhm.
And the Patriots' longest pass attempt wasn't even 20 yards.
Mhm.
Yep.
Like, okay, fine. It's got to be different. If you told me they're retiring this thing and they're going to bring in a brand new offensive coordinator with a completely new, updated, state-of-the-art offense, I don't think I'd shed a tear. And I like Bill
Mhm.
O'Brien. I thought he'd be the answer, but
Yeah.
yeah, your opinion, guys, because again, I'm
Mhm.
just jibber jabbering.
Yeah. No, this is actually something I've said to Eric a couple times now where it was like, how could it look this bad compared to the only thing that's changed between this year and last year was the coordinator. They have pretty much the same talent other than Jacoby Myers, but Jacoby Myers isn't providing your entire offense. And I was like, well, they simplified the offense last year. They made it simple because Patricia didn't know how to call an offense as complicated as Bill O'Brien or Josh McDaniels. And maybe because they simplified it, it was easier on the players to actually understand where they were supposed to be going. Now it didn't look clean, but at least it looked better than it's looked this year. So that could be part of the issue too, where Bill O'Brien's coming in and he's adding all these things, and I think he's really smart, because if you can get to the playoffs and have a successful season with Brian Hoyer as a quarterback, which he did with the Houston Texans, you got to be doing something right. So I would think maybe it is getting too complicated, like you said, where they need to dumb things down, make things simpler, and kind of do what that whole Shanahan style offense does to make things easier for the players and have a lot more kind of structure to the offense rather than these complicated route trees and understanding what the option route is and what the cornerback's doing here. Do I have to go left? Do I have to go right because it's on my inside hip or my outside hip? And we've seen this year a lot where Mac's thrown to the opposite side where the player is going, where you can
Right.
tell, and you can definitely, it's easier to see too when you're in the stands, because where my seats are up in the 300, so you can see everything bird's eye view. And there's a ton of times where they're just not on the same page, and it has to be because part of it is just too complicated for these people.
Yeah,
That's
part of me wonders if it's too complicated or if it's just you don't have the right players for your system,
Mhm.
which goes to the personnel aspect of it, especially considering all the receivers that you've missed in the draft historically, but the last 3 or 4 years, and then the receivers you brought in via free agency versus who else was
Mhm.
available. And outside of Jacoby Myers, and I guess Pop Douglas now and Kendrick Bourne, you've missed so many in those years that it's just part of it, I think, is the talent in the room, but I think part of it too is that it, your system just might be out of date for how to really be successful in the NFL in today's game.
Sure. And that whole idea about it being sight reads and you're going to run a different route based on how they're covering you or whatever. How many guys fell out of Brady's favor because, you know,
Mhm.
he'd throw one or two balls to where he expected them to be. They weren't there, and that guy was persona non grata. It actually started to happen, I thought, with Malcolm Mitchell as a rookie, and that was going to be another guy we were going to throw on the pile of, oh, they couldn't draft this guy. And he figured it out. And by the end of the year, he really had caught on, got Brady's like good graces. And then they don't win the Super Bowl against Atlanta without him. Flat out. I think he
100%.
had 7 catches on 8 targets, and like 6 of them were for first downs. I mean, critical catches. So there was a guy, had he stayed healthy, would have been productive in this for a long time, because once you get it, it seems like you always get it. And Pop Douglas has it. I'd like to think that Booty's going to get there still. You know, they put him out there for 1 catch, and he gets clocked, and he gets an unnecessary roughness call and is out of the game. Again, just so indicative of what's going on here. But yeah, I mean, if you look at like what Sean McVay does, like that was an innovation a few years ago, and now Shanahan, and you know, I certainly Andy Reid evolved. He got a quarterback that was completely different than any that he's ever had before. And despite having turnover at the wideout spot, he's kept it going and turned that team into a wagon every year, regardless of who's out there. And yeah, a lot of that's on Mahomes, but a lot of it's on Andy Reid. And I'm just thinking that it might be time to just mothball this. Just, you know, send it to the Museum of Natural History. We can all study it and say, wow, wasn't that unbelievable? And I'm also thinking that Brady's final year, final Super Bowl at Tampa will be the last time that you're going to see a straight pocket passer win a championship. And I've been hearing that since I was a little kid. I'm not, this whole idea of, oh, you got to have a running quarterback. That's the way of the future. It goes back to like flipping Fran Tarkenton. But it appears to me that it's here. It has arrived, and that's Mac Jones. And that's, I thought, well, they can sustain that. But the guys who are competing in the Final Four of the conference championships every year are those guys that are making plays out of structure where it breaks down. And you know, I watched Gardner Minshew from his own end zone get boxed in, get chased, buy time, get a couple of blocks. Keon White was trying to get in on him, and the left tackle like made a couple stops, and he lobs one up, and a rookie, a 3rd-round rookie, dives and makes the catch. I'm like, there's the contrast between what we're going through and what the Colts, who are a decent team but not great, with their backup quarterback. You know, a guy who was, you know, the 179th pick of the draft or whatever. It in this NFL, it shouldn't be so complicated that you can't complete a 20-yard pass in an entire game. I posted Jones's spray chart. And it looked like something out of the 1932 Bears. Just check down flat, check down middle of the field, and nothing deep. And it's like every rule is set up to make that not be necessary. And it's our existence. And I never thought it would crater this bad.
No, exactly. I don't think either of us did as well. So I think the last question we had for you to wrap up would be one that I don't know if any of us have too much of right now. Is there anything that would give any kind of Patriot fan hope for the coming future? So next year, the short future, at least.
Arguably the best draft position that they've ever had. You know, you were in 2nd grade when they had the 6th pick and they got Richard Seymour. You know, they got Mayo they were in the top 10, but they traded back into the 10th. And beyond that, they've never been in the top half of the 1st round. They have the 2nd most cap room going into next year, and by far the most the following year. So there's flexibility there. I think there is a real base of some young talent on here. I'm wildly high on Christian Gonzalez. I think they just crushed it, and they got a guy who's going to be a star in this league. The back of the secondary, I think, has been immense. You know, I Kyle Duggar, who they have the money to re-sign and hopefully will. I think Jabril Peppers has been a great addition, and Adrian Phillips is just that quiet guy who's always there. They've got a running game like Ramondre Stevenson, the two guards. Now that Cole Strange is playing well, City Sow has solidified that spot, and Michael Onwenu has really come into his own as a right tackle. So there's a basis of things, but who's going to be the quarterback and who's going to be calling the plays and who's going to be the general manager? Those are not small issues. But I think this is not a terrible team. This is not a team bereft of talent. They just need elite athletes and somebody who can figure out a way to put a passing game together with receivers that would be productive in somebody else's team, but aren't clicking here. Tyquan Thornton, dear Lord, I spent $120 on a shirt because I like his number and I kind of like his name, and I was reluctant to do it. I put out a Twitter poll: should I do this? And one of the options was, "What are you, 12 years old?" But it was like 95%. Of course you should, and I did, and now it's like. It's like having a N'Keal Harry shirt at this point. Yeah, Lord. If you could pick like 2 or 3 guys each that you say are the keepers that are going to be the future of this team it's on its next playoff run, would you pick the same guys I have, which is Gonzalez and
I would say Gonzalez.
I'd add in Barmore too. I think he's someone that you can build around on your defensive line. And then Christian Gonzalez at the corner spot. And I don't know if they'll do it, but I'd love to have both Peppers and Duggars long-term as your safeties. And then you have this defense solidified for years going forward. You have Stevenson at running back. And then Sal has been playing really, really well. Cole Strange is getting there since he's been healthy. And then if you re-sign Onwenu, your offensive line is in a better position than it was earlier this season. So I agree pretty much entirely with you. Again, the quarterback is the most important position in all of sports. It depends on, is it Mac Jones? If it's not, what do you do there? And that's something they're really going to have to figure out the rest of the season and the off season. But they have pieces to be.
Yeah, and he's not a young player by any means, but I'll put Matthew Judon in there. I mean, you see without him there that they just cannot generate a pass rush to save their lives. And Josh Uche, who I thought, he's good as a specialist. You know, when you put him out there and, early downs, they're going to run right at him. He's just not that kind of a player, but he's just disappeared. Maybe he's, maybe it's because he's injured, but he's basically, as the gamers would call him, an NPC. He's just a non-playing character now. And to the point where I didn't even know he was playing. After the game, I was watching a video of another play. I'm like, holy cow, Uche was in this game and he played like 25 snaps or something, but just a complete non-factor. So, there's some players that they can afford to get rid of. They held the Colts to 10 points without Juwan Bentley, who's also a cornerstone player that I like in the middle of your defense. And a defense that has extra stress on it because they know they're going to be getting a lot of 3 and outs on the other side of the ball. And that ends up wearing them down over the course of a game. But I think there's the strength of the team. It's not bereft of hope, but between the draft position and the cap room, this league is designed to take the teams that are at the bottom of the barrel and have them get to the top really, really fast. The Patriots have never been at the bottom enough to be able to springboard themselves up with those benefits.
Nope, agree completely. And again, really thankful for you joining us today to really have kind of a therapy session with the Patriots.
Guys, we need it. And it's important that I talk to you now because what I'm going to do is have myself put into a medically induced coma until they straighten all this out. Because the thought of going a bye week, followed by 7 more weeks of this,
Mhm.
where like you just dread Sundays now.
Yeah.
Like, are you like me? I'm actually looking forward to the bye week because I'm not gonna have the pressure of watching this team like just find ways to lose. So, yeah, no, it still always makes us all feel better to talk to
Mhm.
other Patriots fans and just kind of share this pain, and that's how we're gonna get it through it together by laughing about this, embracing the absolute absurdity of it, and know what it's like to be a Jets fan.
Mhm.
You know, it's terrible. It's a terrible feeling. I never
Yeah.
want to repeat it.
Well, hopefully next year is a little bit different from this.
Yeah,
But
in the
again, thank you
meantime,
again.
I just want to bring all the ills that plague mankind into this one season. Like, just
Mhm.
appease the angry gods of football so that they'll say, okay, you guys have suffered enough. Get back to the way things are meant to be, where they're 8-2 at this point and
Mhm.
everyone hates them. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, I really appreciate chatting with you guys, and I hope we get to do it again real soon. But thanks for being so gracious.
Oh, yeah, thanks for coming on, everyone, again. Make sure you pick up his books if you don't have them. Six Rings and then From Darkness to Dynasty. Really great reads, and always make sure you give him a follow on Twitter, and always follow his blogs daily. They're some of my favorite things to read, and not just football stuff too. So really good blog to read, and probably one of my favorite kind of writers ever since college, like 15 years ago. So really great having you on. This is really fun, and thank you again for joining us. And everyone else, just make sure you give us a follow at pats300levelpod.com, and on Twitter, Instagram, Pat's 300 level pod. So thank you again. Look forward to talking to everyone next week.